I'm sure most of you may have heard that there's been many changes with regards to internationally trained nurses migrating to Australia in terms of their AHPRA registration and all of that. There is no better person on the internet right now to discuss this with than Rhea Fawole. She is the founder of Solvi Migration. She's a renowned immigration lawyer in Australia, and today she's going to tell us all about it, okay? Who qualifies for which pathway, who's eligible, and all of that, to clear all the confusion. Hi guys, so this is Rhea Fawole. She is an immigration lawyer in Australia. She has helped several people relocate to Australia, especially nurses. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. Rhea Fawole, I'm so happy to have you here today. I don't know if I've done justice to the introduction, but kindly introduce yourself and then we'll get started. I have loads of questions to ask you right now.
No, thank you so much for having me. And it's lovely to catch up with you again because I know we last spoke, it's probably close to 2 years ago. And the firm was really starting its focus on working with registered nurses. So we now actually have been working with hundreds of nurses who are migrating to Australia. And one of the things that I noted again and again is, of course, the registration processes continue to change. So many nurses would register via the New Zealand Nursing Council. Then the New Zealand Nursing Council introduced its own OSCE exam. Then they introduced something similar to an NCLEX the following year, the IQN theory. Then Australia decided it was going to change some of its registration processes. One, the English requirements changed in March. And then in April, they made all of these changes for people who have registrations in comparable jurisdictions. Now, when I say that, I mean people who have maybe trained in another country, but they're now registering in the US, UK, Canada, Ireland, Singapore, and Spain. And once they've got their 1,800 hours of clinical experience, there's new pathways to register and practice with AHPRA. Which then, of course, opens the doors to migrating and working in Australia. But it's confusing because what I've just described is 6 different pathways.
That's a lot.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so for what most people, including myself, knew, or the easiest way was that, like you said, if you were a nurse in the UK, you'd register with New Zealand. At the time, there was no exam. And then after that, you transfer your registration to Australia because it was possible at the time. Is that pathway possible now, 2025?
It certainly is, yeah. And look, it really does depend where a nurse is currently practicing as for which pathway we would recommend. Okay. So, for example, if they haven't yet gone to one of those comparable jurisdictions and they have a qualification that maybe doesn't have direct recognition, a lot of people will still go via New Zealand because it's more cost effective. So the OSCE exam in New Zealand dollars is currently $3,000, whereas Australia's is $4,000 Australia. So there's a slight discrepancy there in terms of price. And then you're still eligible to convert that registration through something called the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Scheme, known as the TTMRS. So it's a minefield. And then having worked in this for so long, I work with team members in my firm. We have now set up our own registration course because that again and again, so many clients we just want to get through the registration to open the doors for things like independent migration or to be sponsored by an employer, because of course you can't speak to a recruiter or any kind of healthcare provider until you have your AHPRA registration. It takes such a long time when people do it themselves. So we now have a solution for that.
Okay, so now let's talk about those that have registration in comparable countries, and then we'll move to those that do not have, and then what they can do. So let's say I'm a nurse originally from, let's say, Africa, Asia, or the Caribbean, and now I'm registered in the UK, or I'm registered in Singapore, I'm registered in Spain, I'm registered in Canada or Ireland, okay? And I want to move to Australia because I've heard so many good things about Australia. Better pay, better nurse to patient ratios, good weather, and all of that, benefits and all of that. Now, you are saying that for me, I can still go ahead and do the New Zealand registration and then change to Australia. I can switch to, I can still do that. Has there been any updates with regards to this particular process? I know you mentioned the TTMRS.
Yeah. So that
Okay,
Still there. Yeah.
that's still there. Will this be the easiest pathway to Australia now for people who now have experience in any of these comparable countries? Will this be the easiest pathway for them, or the
I
short?
wish that it was that simple to answer. And that's why we came up with the registration course, because it really will depend. There's so many factors that come into it. If we're talking about the comparable countries, so let's focus on those. If you have that registration, as far as AHPRA is treating it in their legislation, having a diploma versus a bachelor's will not stop you from being eligible for the new pathway to Australia. So as long as you have done an OSCE or an NCLEX in order to gain that registration, it was after 2017, you've got your 1800 hours of clinical experience, then you should be able to register with this new pathway. Where it starts to get a little messy is for those in those comparable countries who maybe did qualifications and registrations prior to 2017.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, what happens then?
In that particular circumstance, I would need to, so this is what our firm would do. We also have a special consultation service to examine people's documents, because it really will depend on what the curriculum was that they studied. So we need to have a look and see, it's like, what were the competencies? How many hours? Are the subjects comparable? Will New Zealand give that recognition directly, or will Australia give that recognition? Or are you going to need to do some kind of top up?
Okay. And then when you figure all that out, do you provide, let's say the person needs to do a top up, does your organization help the person to go through all the necessary requirements to now meet up?
So we can certainly recommend different ways to do the top up, but it will really depend on how and where people want to study. I know a lot of people will pick places like University of Derby because they can do the top up online, and so that means they can work it in amongst the crazy work hours that you beautiful nurses do, where you're working all sorts of shifts. So other programs may require that face-to-face and may not work in amongst the hours that you need to keep your job going in the meantime.
Okay. And with all these updates, is there a pathway that has been introduced where I do not have to go through New Zealand? And what is it, if there is?
So with those in the comparable jurisdictions, they can still go through the AHPRA registration, but what we're finding is a lot of people are getting confused. And I'll go over a bit more in the history. So I guess just reintroducing my background, I had 20 years working in the Australian government. 12 of those was spent in immigration. I also spent time as a director in the Department of Health. So what happens in the civil service when we roll out new legislation, the systems don't tend to keep up with it. And this is what has happened with AHPRA. I know a lot of people got confused because in March of this year, 2025, they made all of these updates, and everyone thought it was tied to the registration changes for nurses, but it wasn't. It was actually all health practitioners.
Wow.
So they made all of these updates, but the new updates make it somewhat mismatched to the new streams. So people really do need a lot of guidance, and they need to know how to instruct AHPRA, because the people in AHPRA are still being trained on this and they're not lawyers. So this is kind of where my firm is filling that gap for nurses with the right information. And even in some cases, we take over and we act. So if people want a full legal service, we will actually take care of the registration for them, because I know, like I said, with those hours that you all work, it's and you're in another country, different time zones, dealing with that and trying to navigate it can be a bit much. So for some nurses, we'll do that full service. Others, we have the nurse registration course, and they're able to, in their own time, guide themselves through the requirements and then be able to successfully navigate the new process, which is a direct registration with AHPRA, but it doesn't show up in their portal as a direct registration. So that is confusing for a lot of people.
Okay. And how long is this registration course? If, let's say, I want your organization to assist me, how long would that take?
Well, the registration course is for those who want to self-guide. So it doesn't have the firm acting for them. And in my experience, what I'm seeing, most people in the course are taking a few weeks in amongst ours. I've seen a couple of people who knocked it over in 2 days, which was very impressive. And then, of course, you need to spend the time gathering all of your documents, getting things notarized, and knowing what particular information and how to instruct AHPRA. We added into the course for those who would like to have consultation. We have a nurse registration consultation service as sort of an add-on. If people are still becoming a little unstuck, they can book one of those. And then the next level up would be those who actually want the full done for you service, and often we will have clients who want to migrate independently after that and use Australia's points-based migration, which of course is very attractive for nurses with the right clinical experience because healthcare professionals are in high demand in Australia.
Yeah, I've heard of people who say, like nurses in the UK who have gotten their PR prior to traveling to Australia. They've gotten their Australian permanent residency even prior to traveling. Is that still possible? Is Solvi Migration or your organization able to get such offers for nurses even with all these updates?
Yes, absolutely. So that's actually the bread and butter. I would say 95% of our client base, we are assisting through the full getting their registration, having their skills assessed by ANMAC, so the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council. We prepare expressions of interest for nomination, which is a lot more strategic than people realize it is because there's different rules in every single state and territory and nomination rounds, and then the actual drafting of visa applications. The other, I guess, differences from what I'm hearing with the UK, your ILR rules are a little bit wonky at the moment, and it's quite costly. For the cost that we're looking at investing coming to Australia with this process, it's completely independent, and we have nurses and their whole family being permanent residents before they've even set foot on the plane. So it's quite a different experience for them, and it means for them, their partner, their children, that they're landing in the country as permanent residents. So they're not waiting for any period of time before that happens, which means citizenship in Australia is also very fast. It's only 4 years after you have been resident and 12 months of those on a permanent residency. So it's really quite a unique and worthwhile investment for those who want to go that pathway.
I totally agree. And I feel like that is the main factor that is going to motivate people to, now embark on this Australian journey, especially for people that are here. And we're still waiting for an update with regards to confirmation of this new ILR thing, but it's most likely lots of people are not going to be happy with what we're going to hear. And I have a feeling that is going to push lots of migrant nurses here in the UK to Australia. When it comes to second choice, lots of nurses in the UK want Australia. Rhea, can you just remind us or refresh our memories on why people keep moving from the UK to Australia, or why Australia is a better option than the UK?
So many. And of course, I'm completely biased, but I live on the Gold Coast in Australia, which is one of those prime locations. So beach lifestyle. One of the key things that nurses love what they hear is 8-hour shifts, no 12-hour shifts. And the salaries in some cases can be up to double what you're getting in the UK. When it comes to, some may choose to, obviously if you migrate independently, you're not tied to an employer then. So you've got that freedom to choose what you do with your clinical skills. So for some people, they may actually choose to stick with agency nursing for a while. So I've got friends who do agency nursing, and in some cases, they're getting up to $140 Australian an hour. That's about £70 an hour. So it's substantially more than what they could imagine coming from, as well as no vitamin D for us beautiful melanin sisters. I can just get that naturally every day outside, which is phenomenal. It's just benefit after benefit when you kind of look at the happiness scales and everything of Australians with all of those things. I can't recommend it enough. And certainly this is what we hear from other nurses who are already here. And we love getting those messages from clients when they're like, I've landed here and this is amazing already. So they keep in touch with us and let us know what's happening with their settlement in Australia.
And it's not just nurses, it's even doctors as well. In my facility at the moment, I have met maybe about 5 doctors who are planning to move to Australia right after their residence program. Yeah, and these are British people. They're not even migrants. Like, they're so eager for Australia. And I'm sure they may have also, they have colleagues that have already moved to Australia and have spoken so well of Australia. And that is what is making them want to move. And we know that the salary, what is the average salary of a nurse in Australia at the moment? What is it?
So it would really depend on their level and their band. But let's say from an entry level, we'd be talking about $80,000. So it's about £40,000. But the average that I would see would be about 100 to 120,000 per annum. And then you've got loadings on top of that. And the other thing that I like to talk about is another tip. Our taxation is different for healthcare professionals. So I know that you have things like salary sacrifice over there, but for healthcare professionals, you can actually also salary sacrifice some of your mortgage or your first home payments. So you're reducing your tax taxable income. You're getting more in your pay, and it can be for things like childcare, education for yourself, for your children. You buy a car, instead of paying the bank, you are paying for a lease, and you pay that with pre-tax dollars. So you can have a lot more opportunity to have more take-home pay with the way they structure things for healthcare professionals in Australia.
Wow. So now, what about people that do not have registration in any comparable country, and they do not have any experience in any comparable country, but they so want to move to Australia? How is your organization going to help them in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So for most of them, I would say start with the nurse registration course, because that will really guide them through all of the requirements. And we've made really good partnerships. So for example, the English language preparation, which most of them are going to need to do, we've actually got one that is completely accredited with all the testing organizations. So they're accredited with IELTS, with the OET, and with the PTE academics. So no matter which exam you're preparing for, we've got really great partnership with them. And because they're affiliated with all the test providers, it means they get the up-to-date rubric. Most of the people who do the tutoring used to work for one of the testing organizations, and they all have a master's in TESOL. So they're really good, and all of their referrals are built into the course. And then of course, for those who are going to need to sit for things like OSCE and NCLEX, whether they choose the Australian direct registration or going via New Zealand, we've got a really good partnership with one that actually has 100% success rate in terms of the training preparation to get people ready for those additional exams. So it's definitely got something for all internationally qualified nurses.
I'm sure that I may not be able to, I probably haven't asked you all the important questions that I want to ask you. But if there are people with burning questions right now watching us and they want to contact you for advice, how do they reach you?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to ask. We've got a brand new Instagram channel specifically for this, which is at Nurse Registration. So please go and check that out. If you're wanting to book a consultation with the firm, go to our website. That's www.solvi.com.au.
I'll leave it on the screen. And then do you have any number they can phone, or?
It's best with the time zone differences, because I find most people are outside of Australia. If they can get in with us online, we do actually have a client relations team based in the UK. So if they're wanting to talk about that independent migration pathway, they are ready in the UK time zone to be able to take calls there. But once they've connected through nurse registration, the client relations team can pull them out quite quickly if that's what they're wanting to do, and get on a phone call, get on Google Meets with them, and get the process going.
Wow. So now, I'm sure somebody's wondering, how much are we talking about here with a course, so that they can do it themselves? And then also, if they need to book a call, or if they need your organization to help them through the entire process, how much are we looking at?
So with the course, we've currently got it running like it's brand new. So this is not going to stay forever, but at the moment it's only $199 Australian. So it's a really cost-effective course. When we're looking at that in conversion, that's only about £100. So it's very cheap, but there's 25 videos in there guiding people through all of the different 6 pathways. It also gives some tips on things like the different kinds of healthcare practices, because of course Australia is quite different. It has quite a large public but also private healthcare system. So it does have information about those different types of practices that you may choose to go into when you're in Australia. So that is the course. In terms of, I'd love to give a straight answer around the legal fees for representing someone, but the reality is we need to actually assess case by case, because each person may present with different requirements. For example, do they need help with the registration? Or some will come to us, they've already done that. Are we reviewing the ANMAC skill assessment? Are we doing visas? Do people have any health concerns? Or, as you've rightly said, some people will also have skilled partners. So there may be different requirements, other licensures, other types of skills assessment that we will be assisting with in order to get them nominated. So that's where the sliding scale comes in. But at the moment, they're able to book a paid legal consultation for us to map out the full plan and assess all of that and come up with costs. And that is $400 Australian. And again, they'll find that book a consultation link on our website.
Okay. How long would you say the entire process is once somebody has all the documents ready and they're ready to move to Australia and they probably finished with a course? How long do you think the entire process is to finally get to Australia to start their work?
Yeah, look, it does. It's a hard one because it depends on where someone is up to in their process. And it will also depend on where they have qualified. So for example, if a nurse had done their full bachelor's in the UK, we're going to be able to do their registration and a skill assessment at the same time, which is going to compress the time frame substantially. For others, we may need to be doing a registration first before we can move on to doing a skill assessment, which is going to extend that time frame. It will also depend on things like your English language, if you've got a partner that also is highly skilled, because the nominations, it's not an orderly queue. It's about who are the most competitive and well place. So this is what we work on strategy with our clients. But I have gone in our firm anywhere from finalizing registration to getting a nomination and a visa application in was like 3 months. That was a record time because that is many processes that we had to get through. But I would say most people could anticipate, say, 6 to 12 months to get all of that done.
Okay. Rhea, what are your final words for anyone who's really interested in this pathway? Probably there's a question that I have not asked yet, but then there's something that people should know. What would you say?
Yeah, look, a lot of people are worried. They're like, well, if I migrate independently instead of doing employer sponsored, how do I get work? Well, the reality is in Australia, nurses are the highest on the skill shortage list. There is not going to be a problem. The other thing that people seem to forget when you're doing employer sponsorship, there's a lot of cost for the employer. And in Australia, they're not liable for your visa costs.
Yeah.
So for an employer, it's actually more attractive to have a migrant who's already sorted out their own visa processes, which means you have access to the better jobs than someone who might be waiting for a sponsorship potentially. It's not to say that there aren't some great sponsored roles, but obviously if you look at it from the employer's perspective, having someone who already has the full work rights and they don't need to worry about that, it's going to make you a lot easier to just present rather than presenting yourself as someone who then needs something from the employer at the same time.
Noted. So thank you so much, Rhea. So guys, I would advise that if you were trained in, let's say, Africa, Asia, or the Caribbean, and you're eager to move to Australia with all these new updates, I know it can be very, very confusing. If you need an expert, to assist you through the entire process and make your journey smooth, I would advise that you reach out. I'll leave the picture of the websites on the screen, Solvi Migration, or book a call with Rhea's team. I'll leave all the details in the description, guys. Contact them and get some advice, some recommendations so that you can make your journey very smooth. Also, if you're already in the UK, you're registered with the UK NMC, or you have registration in Canada, Singapore, Spain, New Zealand, and what's the other country? Ireland as well. With the new updates, I know it's going to be very, very confusing. And probably Rhea has, she knows exactly how to make your journey smoother and simple as well. Just book a consultation with her, and I'll leave the details of her organization on there. Thank you so much. If you have any questions that I was not able to ask Rhea, kindly leave it in the comments. I'll try as much as possible to answer you, or maybe somebody from Rhea's team will be there in the comments to answer you as well. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Thank you once again.